Eliezer. zwei Chalukim der erste keine. Chelek Rishon. So this week we have the parsha of Chayei Sara, beginning with Sara Imenu and her petira, and going on with the sugya, the parsha of Eliezer, Eved Avraham, and his quest to find the Kala for Yitzchok Uvinu, ultimately to be the second of the Imois HaKadoshos. 2 weeks ago we dealt with Mitzvahs Milah. Last week we spoke about Technos HaSorachim. This week we're going over to Shulchan Aruch Even HaEzer. And the basic topic we will be discussing is the minig of Badeken for the Chuppah, as you all have experienced either personally or as spectators on the simchas of others. For the Chuppah, Chosin walks over to the Kala, covers her, and that is the minig of Badeken. What is the essence of this minig? What is its origin? Where does it come from? So in this week's parasha, which is the longest parasha in Chumash Bereishis, Samach Zayin, 67 psukim, ultimately when Eliezer brings Rivka to Yitzchak's domain, ותאמר אלו עבד מי הוא איש הרוזע ההולך בסודה לקרוסנו ויאמר הוא עבד הוא אדוני ותיקח הצעיף ותסקס. So the Ramah brings, Evan has a Simon Ahmed Aleph, Siv Beis, that the minig is lechasois pnei hakalois hatznuois. Simon Ahmed Aleph is not the dinam of Chuppah, but rather the dinam of Kedushin. And Simon Aleph deals with the worth of Kesef Kedushin. Pruta, the minig to be Mekadesh with Erim, with a Tabas. And the Ramah says, the minig is Lechasois, Pnei HaKalois, Hatznuois. The modest and the tznias dekekalas cover their faces, and therefore, whatever the Chazan gives B'Kedushin is valid, because the fact that she is willing to be Niskalish without seeing and checking and examining and deciding, is this worth enough or not, means she is willing to be Niskalish regardless of what he gives. So it is not in the context of Chuppah that the Ramah writes that the minig is Lechazois Pnei HaKalos. The Ramah quotes Chuvas HaRashba. The various different halachas of Chuppah are in Siman Samach Aleph, and that is the continuation of after Hilchas Kedushin. However, Siman Nun Hey b'Seif Harishon, the Mechaber writes, what is defined as Chuppah? Chuppah is Nisuin. We know that there are two different stages. The Kinyan Ish Be'ishtoi, number one is Erusin, also defined as Kiddushin, and after Kiddushin we have Nisuin. Nisuin defined by Chazal as Chuppah. So the Rishonim in the first perek of Ksubis bring two different opinions. What is Chuppah? Whether it is Yehud or it is Hachnosa L'Rshusa. Our minig is that there is a canopy on 4 poles, and that is what we call Chuppah. So the Mechaber and Sif Aleph Siman Nun Hey brings most of the Rishonim, basically the Rambam's opinion, that Yehud is Chuppah, and the Ramah writes, Yesh Oimrim, the Chuppah Eino Yehud, Ela Kol Shevia Chosan Lebeisoi L'Shem Nisuin. ויש אומרים שהחופה הוא שפורסן סודר על ראשם בשעס הברוכה. Let us note, porson sudar al rosham. Rosham is plural. Rosh HaChosen v'hakal. So he does not refer to the minig of Badeken in which the Chosen covers the Kala's head or face. But rather, this is the chuppah, which is a canopy, and that is the sudar sheporsam al rosham. So what is the minig of Badek in which the chosen covers the Kala's face? The Maharil and Hilchas Nesuin writes that the minig is that the chosen takes part of the bridal gown of the similar Kala, which is called a tzipel, and he covers the face of the Kala. However, when the Maril's daughter got married, he said that is a mistake, and what has to be done is the tzeifim should cover the heads of the chosen and the Kala. And the Maril writes that the origin of this minig is the posuk in this week's parsha, Vatikach hatzeif v'tiskas. That is the basic source, the basic origin of the minig of covering the chosen and the Kala.
Wasn't the color in there? It was just the color in the color.
Well, in the posuk, it seems to be quite obvious that Yitzchak wasn't the one to cover her, Vatikach, not Vayikach. She saw him from a distance. So, whatever it may be, this is only a remez ba'am. It is not that this is the interpretation of the posuk. This wasn't chuppah. She covered herself. But kanireh b'derech remez, the Meir writes, this is the origin and the source of the minig. This is not what happened and transpired between Yitzchak and Rivka, but this is the source of the minig of Badek. Who is the one that covers the Kala? The Orcha Shulchan, Simenun Hey, Ebenezer, that is the Ramah that I just quoted, writes, Sif Tezayin, that the Chosen is the one to do so, but the Kitzur Shulchan Orcha, Simen Kuf Mem Zayin, and Sif Gimel writes that the Mechubodim and the Machatonim are the one that cover the Kala's face. And obviously that goes back a few hundred years, different minhagim. So the Bach in Simenun Hey writes that the Chosen is the one, he should participate in covering the Kala's head, or do it alone, or together with others, and the Bach does maintain that that is defined as Chuppah, and that is Nisuin. That is the opinion of the Bach in Simen Nun Hey. The Beis Yosef and Simen Samach Aleph and Ebenezer brings the Orchos Chaim. Orchos Chaim was one of the Rishonim. The Orchos Chaim quoting the Itter, that those people that think that Prisas Hinuma al Rosh Hakala is Chuppah, that is a mistake, and therefore the Beis Yosef does not bring this minig in Shulchan Aruch, because he quotes the Orchos Chaim saying, people think that that is defined as Chuppah, that is a mistake. But even in the Beis Yosef, quoting the Orchos Chaim, negating the opinion that that is Chuppah, also speaks about Prisas Hatzeif al Rosham, in plural. So we are dealing with two different minhagim. One minig is covering the heads of the chosen and the kala. That is basically what we do today. That there is a chuppah on four poles, and it's if some beged, a cover, a canopy covering them. That is one minig. The other minig is covering the kala's head, and regarding each of these minhagim, some Rishonim and some poskim maintain that we are dealing with Kinyan Chuppah. Once again, the poskim deal with this question as in Shin Mem Beis and Even Ezer and Dinei Avelus. When the Taz deals with the question, from what stage is the Kala considered a Nesua? Is it from the Badekin or only later? And the Dogel Maravovo, the Noide Beyehuda, in his Agos and Shulchan Aruch, Yoredei Shim and Beis writes that the minig in Russia was, and that is the minig today in Volin, that is what the Noide Beyehuda writes in Dogel Maravovo, that the chosen is the one to cover the Kala's face. If that is the minig, it could be considered chuppah. But in our Medina, in Austria, writes the Noide Beyehuda, the chosen isn't even present. The mechatonim, the mechabodim, the elders of the community, they walk into the Kala and cover her face, and the chosen isn't there. And therefore, this cannot be considered chuppah if the chosen isn't even a participant. However, the Noidibuda writes, if the chosn would be the one to be mechabed the rov to do it, then we might say and argue that a shlichus, and shlichus shalodem kamoisoi. So it could be considered and defined as chuppah. But the minig is that the chosn has no say. Nobody asked him. This is something the family does, the mechutonim do, the mechubodim do, and the chosn has no input, and therefore this cannot be defined as chuppah. So the Noida Yehuda argues it depends on the different minhagim. In Russia, in Volin, the minig was where the chosn covers the kala, and in that case it might be defined as chuppah, but in other places, in other kehilas, in other congregations, it was the elders of the community, the Rav, the Mechatonim that did it, and therefore, if the chosn is not involved, he is not a participant at all, then this definitely cannot be considered as chuppah. The Binyan Tzion, Oruch Laner, living 150 years ago, in his Chuvas, Binyan Tzion Kuf Lametes, his interpretation of the minig quoted by the Maril, he says that is what our chuppahs are. And he means it's a if that covers the chosn and the kala. In Sephardi communities, the chosn is mis'atav b'tzitzis, and then that talis is spread out above the chosn and the kala. So the Ramon Simenun Hey brings the minig of a cover that covers the chosn and the kala, v'yeshoim and that is chuppah, and that coincides with our minhag. But the other Ramon Simen Lamed Aleph Siv Beis, when he writes Machasen Pnei HaKalois Hatznuos, it is quite obvious that is not chuppah. If it would be chuppah, what does it have to do with Kalas Hatznuos? Obviously, the Kalas Hatznuos, the modest ones, and Merov Tznius and Busha, they prefer not having their faces exposed when numerous people are around the chuppah. And so this minig has to do with tznius, has nothing to do with the kinyan of chuppah. So regardless of whether the chosn is the one to cover the kala's face or other people of the community do so, the wording of the Ramah, the nusach of the Ramah, noyag l'chasos pnei hakalos hatznuos, indicates that this minig has to do with tznius, but it has nothing to do with the kinyan of chuppah. So there are numerous opinions, Lakan, Ulachan. While the Bes Yosef rejects the idea that this is chuppah, the Bach and the Drisha do think so. And the Drisha makes an interesting point. We do the Badekin before the Kiddushin. So obviously one could do chuppah before Erusin. And that is why in the Nusach HaBrocha and Berechas Erusin we say Mekadosh Shami Yisrael Al Yedei Chuppah V'Kiddushin. The proper formulation should have been Kiddushin V'Chuppah because Kiddushin comes before Chuppah. That is according to the opinion of most Rishonim, that Chuppah is either Yichud or Achnosa LaBeisa. So after the ceremony and the Kiddushin and the Chasana, the chosn and the kala go into the Chayei Yichud. After the entire ceremony, he takes her home. So according to most Rishonim, one of those two stages would be considered chuppah. But then the nusach of the brocha should be ali de kedushin v'chuppah. Why do we say chuppah v'kedushin? So the Drisha argues that this nusach obviously originated by those that define the badekin, which is before the kedushin, as chuppah. And chuppah is valid even though it was done before the kiddushin, and that is why the nusach habrocha is mekadosh Ami Yisrael al yedei chuppah v'kiddushin, first chuppah and then kiddushin. Tosfos Yume Yud Gimel Amud Beis, we find a very, very interesting opinion, and Tosfos writes that actually only by Bisulois they had chuppah. Almones Igrushis there was no chuppah. Only Yichud, or at the end of the Chasa. Psulois had chuppah, and that is the Gemara in Ksobis Tes Zayin Amud Beis. If we have a matter of doubt, and one was married, we don't know whether it was a psula or not, whether the Ksubis Mosayim or the Ksubis Mona. Im yesh eidem sheyotzo behinuma ksiboso mitzayim mosayim. Tosfos writes that hinuma, that is defined as chuppah, and only by psulos they had chuppah. So Tosfos does write that the hinuma, which is the tza'if, which covers the face of the kala, according to Tosfos, Yud Gimel Masechet Yumi Yud Gimel Amid Beis, that is defined as chuppah, and the same opinion we find in Abu Darham, Hilchas Berchas Erusin V'Nisuyim. And the Abu Darham brings an additional source from Chazal. While Tosfos quotes Ksubas Tezayin, Im Yesh Edem Shiyotza Behinuma Ksubasa Misayim, the Abu Darham quotes the Gemara in Kedushin Daf Yud Ches, Kivan Shepires Talisoi Oleo, Shuv Eino Yochel Lamochro. Av Shekidesh Es Bitoy, Eino Yochel Lamochro, Laomo Evrio, Kivan Shepires Talisoi Oleo. So the Abu Darham quotes that Gemara, obviously Pires Talisoi Oleo, when he covers her with his garment, that is defined as chuppah, as nisui. So the opinion that the badekin, also called al yedei Chazal hinuma, is chuppah, has two different sources in the Talmud, quoted by two different Rishonim. Tosfos Yumi Yud Gimel Amid Beis, quoting the Gemara Ksubas Tezayin. Abu Darham El Chaseres and Nesuim, based on the Gemara in Kedushin Daf Yud Ches, Kiven Shapiras Talisay Oleo, Shuv Einoi Yochol Lemach. So the Bach and the Drisha both maintain that when the chosin covers the face of the kala with a cloth, that is defined as chuppah. This opinion is rejected by the Taz, also in Even Ezer Siman Unhei, and also in Yerodeh Siman Shin Mem Beis. Most of the Achronim are in the opinion of the Taz, including Rabbi Yaakov and Shilas Shabbos Chelik Beis Siman Kuf Ayin Beis. So we have two different opinions regarding, besides the classical approach to chuppah, Rambam, Rosh, most other Rishonim, including the Shulchan Aruch, either Yichud or Hachnosa Lebeisai, two different opinions. One is Tzoif Otalis Sheporsen Arosh Hachosen Vehakala. That is our chuppah. That is what we call chuppah in our days. The four poles covered by a cloth above the head of the chosen and the kala together. That is an opinion quoted by the Ramah. The Mechaber does not bring this opinion, but the Ramah does. Yesh oimrim in Siman Nun Hey. But the idea that the Badekin is chuppah, that is the Bach and the Drisha, but it is not brought neither in Ramah nor in Shulchan Aruch. The Taz clearly rejecting that opinion. And therefore, when I am a Sada Kiddushin, I am not makbid that the Eide Kiddushin see the Badet. Even though I know that many Gedolim and many Rabbonim are makbid. I saw quoted in the name of Rav Eliashiv that the Eidim should accompany the Chosn and the Kala and be there by the Badekim. I even saw quoted in his name that once he told the Chosn that he has to be Mechaven, to be koinen with the Badekim. That is not my minig, because all the major poskim totally disregard this opinion. It is not brought in the Mechaber nor in the Ramah. The B'Seisiv rejects this opinion in the name of the Orchos Chaim. It is rejected by the Taz. It is the opinion, the shit of the Bach and the Drisha, ein halocha kemoisa. And therefore, I am not makbed that the Eidim testify or see the Badekim. It is more of a family Indian, but the Eidim do not have to be there.
It's nice.
Must the Beged belong to the Chassan? What do you say?
No, I'm saying the Yesham and that it's not Shabbat Snulis, so therefore it's nothing to do with Kedushin.
Right. As the Ramu brings this shitta, this minhag,
That's what I'm saying.
but it's clearly not chuppah. It's no shematz noise. So not long ago, I was asked by a choshev from Lakewood who married off his daughter, does the chosn have to be kaina, the cloth, which we do the badekim? Many Chasanim are makpid today to be kinda the Chayei Yichud or the Daladamis where the Chuppah is. I do not think it's necessary. First of all, when you rent the hall, you rent the entire package, whatever is needed to proper Kiddushin. So if we assume that the Chayei Yichud has to belong to the Chosn, obviously it does. I mean, you rented the place, and that includes the hall and everything that comes along with it. But I think there is no need to have a proper kinyan in the Chayei Yichud. It is designated for the Chosn and the Kala, and that is enough. Same regarding the Chuppah. However, what about the Hinuma? Usually it's either rented, it comes with a package, with a kit. In Loshen Kodesh, modern Loshen Kodesh, it's called the Erka. You know, there's a kit that you rent, all the accessories, everything that is needed. You take it from neighbors. So everybody knows that the Chosn has to make a kinyan the tabas, otherwise the Kiddushin wouldn't be valid. So even if the parents buy the ring, they are very well aware that the Chosn has to make a kinyan because he has to be mekadosh with his money, with his possession. How about the Hinua? So if it's only an union of tznius, then it doesn't have to belong to the Chosn. Many Achronim maintain, Achronim and Rishonim, and according to the Shulchan Aruch, that was the minig. The Noidi Budu writes that was the minig in Austria and in many Ashkenazi kehelas, that the Chosn wasn't involved at all in the Bedetin. So why should it have to be his? But according to those poskim, that Hinuma is Chuppah, does it have to belong to the Chosn? Not necessarily. He is the one that covers her face, but who says it has to belong to him? Well, maybe it depends on the two different sources. If the basic source is Ksubis Tezayin, the Lashon of the Gemara is Im Yesh Edim Shiyotzo Behinuma. But there is no emphasis who this Hinuma belongs to. If the source is Kedushin Yud Ches, the Lashon of the Gemara there is Kivin Shepires Talisoy Oleho Shuv Eino Yochal Mochra Talito. He's Talis. So if that is the source, maybe it should be his Talis.
He's a father.
Kivin Shepires Talisoy Oleho. No. I think it is the Chosn that spreads his Talis. It is not the father.
He's not sad.
The father is the one that gives her to her Chosn. But he is the one Shepires Talisai Oleh. So that would indicate maybe it should be his. So, but because anyway, I think that most valid sources in halacha maintain that Hinuma is only an Indian of tznius and it's not chuppah. Therefore, I don't think it's a real teda. Meheyois toiv, why not? But it definitely isn't a halachic peda. And this brings us to the question: do we need Adam for the badekin? And as I said before, I am not makbid. And the reason I'm not makbid is once again the Mechaved and Amodataz, most of the major poiskim shemapiyam onochayim don't maintain that this is kinyan chuppah. But even if it would be kinyan chuppah, not necessarily that we need Adam for nisui. We do find Eidei Kiddushin, and Eidei Kiddushin are ma'akev. Actually, Kiddushin isn't valid if there weren't Adam that could testify on the Kiddushin. Eidei Kiddushin are defined in the poskim as Eidei Kiyum. They are not only necessary if Beis Din will need to validate the Kiddushin, they are necessary for the Chaloisa Kiddushin, and Kiddushin that was performed Beinoi Lebeino, without Adam being present. Those Kiddushin are not Chal, and they have no validity. So this is a separate discussion. What is the reason and what is the source that Kiddushin are invalid if there weren't any Eid? But everybody knows that we are Miyachid Eidei Kiddushin. Do we need Adam for Nisuyin? That is a major discussion in Rishonim and in Achronim. Earliest source being Toises Liazok and Kiddushin Daf Yudum and Beis, who maintains there is no need for Eid and Nisuyin. It is only Eid and Kiddushin, not Nisuyin. The Or Sameach, Perek Yud, Hilchas Ishus, Halacha Yud Beis, Tzoy Sakoshin in his magnificent Sefer on Even HaEzer, Avnei Miluim, Lamed Ches, Yud Zayin, and I dealt at length with this question of Minchas Osher Chumash Devorim, Siman Mem Vav. Which brings us to another question. I quoted before, 15 minutes ago, the Dovel Mervovel in Yoredei Shimon Beis, who brings different minhagim, who is the one that covers the Chala's face. So in Russia and in Berlin, the minhag is that the chassan is the one to do so. In Austria, the Noidei Yehuda testifies, it is the Mechutonim and Mechubarim. Those are the two different minhagim quoted by the Aruch HaShulchan on one hand, from Novardo, and the Kutz Shulchan Aruch on the other hand. So the Noidei Yehuda writes, if the chassan would be the one to be Mechabed Darav, then we would argue maybe it's Shlichus. Is there Shlichus by Nisuyim? There definitely is Shlichus by Kiddushin. That is the first Mishnah and the second Perek of Masechet Kiddushin. Uish mekadesh ba'u b'shluchoi. Uish miskadeshes ba'u b'shlucho. Do we find the concept of Nisuyin by Chuppah? Well, could a person make a shaliach? You know, you go into the Cheder Yichud instead of me. I'm ashamed. I don't really know her that well. So, would you be willing to be my shliach? That sounds totally ridiculous. But would it work? Would it work? Is there shlichus by Nisuyin? Rabbi Akiva Eiger, Chuvas Rabbi Akiva Eiger, Tinyon Semenun Aleph maintains, definitely not. Why not? Kol davar she'eino b'shliach ein bo tanai. That is a Gemara different sources in Shas, primarily in Ksubis Daf Ayin Dalet. Anything we cannot perform al yedei shliach, we cannot make it tanai. And that is why Ein Tanai B'chalitza. Ksubas Ayin Dalet, Yevomis Kuvo. This Gemara appeals twice in Shas. So Rabbi Akiva Eiger is Mesupek whether Yesh Tanai B'nisuyin, and he writes, there is no Shlichus B'nisuyin, so how could there be Tanai? However, there's a Gemara in Ksubas Daf Nun Ches. Ksubas Nun Ches, the Gemara says, Mosar Hu'av B'shlichei Habal, that is already defined as Nisuyin. Shluchei Habal, obviously they're Shluchim, so maybe this proves Sheyesh Shlichus B'nisuyin. Why wouldn't there be Shlichus B'nisuyin? What would be the difference between Kiddushin and Nisuyin? So let me share with you what I wrote at great length in Minchas Osher Masechet Kiddushin, once again Minchas Osher Chumash Devorim Siman Vav, and in various different tshuvas. In Dinei Torah there are two different types of chaloisim. There are acts in which the person is the Baal HaMaisa. And that includes Kinyonim, Kiddushin, Gerushin. It is his power, his authority. He could either purchase or sell. He could either be Mekadesh or Megadish. There are different Dinei Torah in which the person, quoting the language of Reb Shimon Shkop, person isn't the Baal HaMaisa. He just has to go through the motions. And the Dina Marchal B'koyach HaTorah. The most basic example being Chalitza. So in those two sources, Ksubas Ayin Dalet, Yevomis Kuvav, the Gemara says, one cannot make a Tanai in Chalitza. He cannot stipulate. You cannot give Chalitza and say, if your father is going to give Mosayim Zuz, then the Chalitza is valid. If not, it is void, invalid. No. Stipulation wouldn't work. You cannot make it Tanai b'chalitza. Why? Because there is no shlichus b'chalitza. But the Gemara doesn't explain why wouldn't there be shlichus b'chalitza. Why is chalitza different than gerushin or kedushin or kinyonim or many other things that we can do al yedei shliach shlicha shel adam k'maisa? The Gemara falls short of explaining, well, there is no tnai because there is no shlichus. But why isn't there any shlichus? And what is the logic? Something we cannot do al yedei shliach, we cannot stipulate. What does one have to do with the other? So Ge'oine Basroi, the great Rosh Hashivas of the past 100 years, starting off with Reb Chaim Brisker and Hilchas Mi'un, Reb Chaim al-Rambam, Reb Chaim's two great Talmidim, Reb Shimon and Reb Elchanan, each of them in his own unique style. And I could only explain the way I understand it. So, in some halachas, the person performs a mitzvah. He does what he does, and the dina marchal b'koyach hatoy. In kiddushin, in geushin, in the vast array of different kinyonim, there is logic. There is logic in each and every one of these mice. Each kinyan has some logic of baus, whether it's Mashiach, or Kesef, or Suda. Exchange has a basic logic. In acquisition, how does one acquire? When you pay for something, you are entitled to get something for what you gave. Kiddushin, Kesef, Shtar, Bia have some intrinsic logic. Gerushin the same. What happens by Chalitza? She takes off his shoe and spits, and how would that invalidate or how would that absolve issues? How would that absolve Zik? So obviously this is just a din Torah. You do what you do, and the Zika is absolved b'koyach hatoyah. Many years ago when I was a young Magachir, this goes back about 30 years or more, one of my Talmidim wrote the shiurim, and when I checked his notebook later, he made a very interesting analogy when he wrote this shir I said. So I said, by Chalitza, he is not the Balamaisa. He is not the one to absolve the Zika, because there is no basic logic between the motions, the acts that are done, and the outcome. He added on his own, Kemata Moshe asher po'alo oises b'Mitzrayim. Well, I like that analogy. Moshe Rabbeinu with his magic wand, Moshe Rabbeinu, imamata asher biyodoi netei yotcho al eretz Mitzrayim, and he brought Kinim and Tzvadeim and split the Yarden, and that wasn't the koyach of Moshe. Neither was it the koyach of the Mata Asher B'Yodai. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, this is what you do, and I am the one to decree what will happen. In a way, in the realm of halacha, by chalitza, you do what you do, but you are not the one to absolve the zikr. That is the koyach hatah. So a person could delegate authority when the authority is his. And therefore a person could be mekadosh al yedei shliach, megarish al yedei shliach. He could make kinyonim al yedei shliach because that is his authority, and he is executing his power. By chalitza, it is not his power. He is only doing what he is obliged to do, and the chalais is v'koyach ha'torah, and therefore he cannot delegate authority that isn't his. He cannot give to others a power that is not in his possession. And that is why there is no shlichus by chalitza. We don't really understand chalitza, but that's the gzeres hakosov. That is the din Torah. When you do what you do, this is what will happen. And therefore, maybe, it is only when the choletz and the chalutza, he and she go through the act and they do what they have to do al pi Torah. It is only then that the zika is absolved, and this is a power that cannot be delegated to an agent, to a shaliach. And that is also the basic logic Why Tanai is dependent on Shlichus. A person could stipulate something that he does with his power. This is my Ratzon, this is my will, and I am authoritative, and therefore I could stipulate on what condition I want and what condition I do not agree. But when the mice is not really your power, your authority, it is b'koyach ha'torah, you cannot stipulate. You're like a stranger. And that is the basic logic, kol she'eino b'shlichus eino b'tanai. And that is chalitza. And I want to take this same concept over to nisuyin.
Why can't he make a shliach to do his part of the nice
Well, I don't know whether you learn the sugya of shlichus, but most of the Chayei maintain there are two different concepts of shlichus. Even though in my sefer I made it very clear, my opinion is there can't be two different concepts, because that should be reflected in the basic sugya in Kiddushin Daf Mem Aleph. But sometimes shlichus is defined as delegating authority, and that is the shlichus of chalois, Kiddushin, Gerushin, Kinyonim, Hafroshes Tumas Amaisis. Sometimes shlichus is only, there is no chalois, various different mitzvahs that we could perform al yidei shliach, whether it's milas habein or many different things, bedikas chometz, many different mitzvahs we could perform al yidei shliach. What we are dealing with is a chalois, because in a way chalitza is a chalois, and the objective of chalitza is, of course, a zikah. To absolve the zika, and that woman should be able to get married to any other person. Because as long as neither yibum or chalitza was performed, she is bound to the oven, and she can marry no one else. So we are dealing with the chalois. So why would it be different than Kedushin, Gerushin, Kinyonim, that a person could do al yidei shliach? The explanation is as above elaborated. When I have the authority and I do what I do with my power, I could delegate authority to others. But when all I do is just mitzvah satayah, and in a way that is above and beyond the realm of our understanding, the performance of this mitzvah brings about that zika is absolved, that is not an authority I could delegate to others. Even though there are mitzvahs that have no chalois that we could perform al yidei shliach, but what defines all those mitzvahs is that the yikar mitzvah is the outcome. In our case, in which the gzeras hakos of the din Torah is, you do what you do, and that brings about an effect that is not within your power, and that is the absolvement of zika. This is something which cannot be delegated to others, and this is authority which isn't mine, and therefore I cannot pass it on to an agent. That is the basic spot. This brings us back to Kiddushin and Nisuyin. So in many different sources in Shas we find a mekadesh eso isho almana she'ein lach olai she'er ksuz v'oina. There is a machlokes whether t'noi kayam or t'noi bottle. Did you ever think, what does it have to do with Kiddushin? All three chiyuvim, she'er ksuz v'oina, aren't relevant only from Nisuyin and Arusa. And Arusa, before the wedding, is not entitled neither to she'er nor to ksus nor to oina. So why is that dependent on the Kiddushin? Why don't Chazal say hanoseh ta'ishu almana she'ein loch olai she'er ksus v'oina? All three chiyuvim are irrelevant up to the stage of nisuyin. So why do Chazal say amekadesh eshu ishu almana she'ein loch olai she'er ksus v'oina? The explanation is a very simple one. The only kinyan a ish has be'ishtoi is kiddushin. Nisuyin is not a chalais that the person makes. Where is the source of nisuyin? Almost nobody knows. Because ki yekach ish isho uvala is erusin, is kiddushin. So where is the source of nisuyin? It is in Parshas Matos, in the Parsha of Nidorim. Ve'im beis isho nidora. Up to Nisuyin, Ovio v'balo mefira nidoreo. Together is a partnership. From Nisuyin and on, the father is no longer relevant, and the husband alone has the power to absolve her nidorim. How is that described in the Torah? Ve'im beis isho nidora. So beis isho, that is the source of Nisuyin. That is essentially what Nisuyin is all about. Beis isha. So Nisuyin is only the culmination of erusin. What the husband does is only erusin. Nisuyin is a matzav of ishus. That is the culmination of kinyan erusin. But Torah Kinyan is only erusin. Nisuyin, in a way, is similar to chalitza. Nisuyin is a mitzias. And therefore, Rav Rishonim maintain, Nisuyin is achnosa lebeisa, or yichud. Yichud, by its very definition, is not a kinyan. Achnosa lebeisa is not a kinyan. These acts don't have the nature of kinyan or acquisition. Nisuyin is only a mitzias. In Jewish law, there could be no Nisuyin without Kiddushin. But Nisuyin is just the next step. It's not a chalois. It is a mitzias. It is a matzav. It is a matzav that we learn from the Pasuk, Ve'im beis isha nidor. After Kiddushin, it is only natural that they come together in their mutual home, and that is what we define as Nisuyin. Can I have a Rambam Noshi?
Why is Chuppah koina? Rav Hina Chuppah koina.
Okay, Rav Hina is Machadish, ve'ein halacha kemoisoi, that Chuppah is not only Nisuyin, it is also valid as Kiddush. We already have a Rambam. So on the very first halacha in Hilchas Ishus, very interesting Rambam. Koydem matan Torah hoyo adam pogea isha b'shuk ibrotzahu v'hilisu oisa machnisa lebeisoi beinu levenatzmoi v'tiyalo leisha kivan shenitne Torah nitztavu Yisrael shem yirtzahu ish lisi isha yikna oisa tchilo b'fnei Eidem v'yachar kach tiyo leisha shenemar ki yikach ish isha v'bo oleo. So many ask, why is this relevant? The Rambam is not a historian. Why would it be relevant what was Koydem Matan Torah? So I once participated in a Sheva Brochus, and there was a very choshev Rosh Hashiva who asked this question. He said, so why doesn't the Rambam write in Hilchas Shchita, Koydem Matan Torah hoyo odam pagea b'heime b'shuk, v'hoyu noichlo v'oichlo? And kiven shenitne Torah nitztavu lishchoit esa b'heime. When the Sheva Bruchas was over, I said, how interesting. A similar formulation that we find at the beginning of Hilchas Ishus is only find one other place in the Rambam, and that is in Hilchas Shchita. And the Rambam does write, Koydem matan Torah, hoyo odom noicher b'heime v'yoichlo, kiven shenitne Torah nitztavenu lishchoit. You're a prophet, I told him. Wow. You ask, why doesn't the Rambam write? You could ask that question by many other mitzvahs. You were so lucky to ask the question on Shchita. Well, the Rambam does write in the Shchita, a similar formulation that we find here in Hilchos Issues. But in reality, why does the Rambam begin Hilchos Issues in such an interesting way? I think when we closely examine and analyze this Rambam, Nisuyin hasn't changed. Nisuyin is the same as it always was. Koydem Matan Torah, hoya odem pegei shebeshuk im rotzahu vehi lisu oisa machnisa labeiso boya labeina labeinasma v'tia leisha. Kivan shenitne Torah netztav Yisrael shem yirtzo ish lisu isho yikna oiso tchila b'fnei Eidem. That is the only change. Before Nisuyin, you need Kinyan. That is Kedushin. Yikna oiso tchila b'fnei Eidem. V'achar kach Tihiyelo leisha. How? Tihiyelo leisha. After Matan Torah, you need to do Kiddushin first. And then, same as it was Lifnei Matan Torah. So Lifnei Matan Torah was a Metzias. It was a Matzav. Machnisa lebeisoi v'tihiyelo leisha. Essentially, that is the same. Now, let me make this very clear. You know, I'm a chosed, as you see me, and you don't have to be a chosed to say this. Every frum Jew would say this. Well, definitely Nisuyin, our Nisuyin isn't the same as all those billions of people out there. Oh, it definitely isn't the same. But I'm not dealing now with Kedusha and Tahara and Snius and many different things in Yiddishkeit. I'm dealing with halachic definitions. By halachic definition, Nisuyin hasn't changed. Nisuyin is a Metzias. What has changed is Yikna Oiso Tchilo B'fnei Eidem. And I also think it's very clear in the Rambam, Kedusha needs Eidem. Nisuyin doesn't need Eidem. Yikna Oiso Tchilo B'fnei Eidem. V'achar kach Tihiyelo leisha. That doesn't require Eidem. Only Kedushin requires Eidem. Nisuyin is only what you do. Machnisa lebeisoi, yichud, and the dinam archal bekoyach hatoyr. And therefore one cannot stipulate by Nisuyin. So even though Sheikh says va'ina aren't relevant at Nisuyin, but you cannot stipulate in Nisuyin just like you cannot stipulate in Chalitza. This is not a chalois that is dependent on you. And therefore, when you make a t'nai, you need to make that t'nai in the kiddushin. And that is why one cannot make a shliach for Nisuyin, as Rabbi Akiva Eiger argues in Tinyona Chuvas Siman Nun Aleph. Contrary to what the Noida Yehuda writes, that maybe if the chassan sends the Rav to do the bedekin, that is chuppah al yedei shaliach. And I think Rabbi Akiva Eiger is right, and some other achronim, there is no shlichus in chuppah. There cannot be any shlichus by Nisuyin, because this is not the chalois that the person makes. What he does is just the matzav, the metzias of ishus. When a husband takes his wife home, with yichud, machnisa lebeisoi, and the various halachas and obligations that come with Nisuyin are chal b'koyach hatoyah. And therefore there cannot be any shlichus b'chuppah, and there can be no t'nai on chuppah. You cannot stipulate when it is not your power and your authority that brings forth the chalois and the entire package, whatever it entails.
If we assumed it was yichud, couldn't we have just not even have to come on to this? Just say more simply, there needs to be a matzav of kirba, and that shliach can't have the mitzvahs of kirba with the isha for you.
Maybe. But I think it is not only a technicality. I think it goes beyond that. But you're making a good point.
How can you have chuppah before, how is chuppah moil before kiddushin?
That is a very good question, and actually it's a big arichas in the Mishnah Lamelach. And this question begins in the Ramban and Kiddushin Daf Yud. My basic response would be you cannot have chuppah before kiddushin. And that is right according to most Rishonim that maintain that chuppah is yichud or achnos ala beisoy. We could have chuppah and kiddushin together. And that is actually what we do every day. When a chosin is mekadosh shekalat tachas chuppos, at least according to those opinions that have more halachic significance, because the Ramah brings the opinion that what we call chuppah today is actually kinyan chuppah, so it's not before the kiddushin, it is together with the kiddushin. When a person is mekadosh tachas chuppah, then Erusin and Nisuyin actually come together. One might argue they don't come together, but they are very close one to the other. And the moment she is Me'ureses, right after that, she is also Nisua. However, those opinions, the Bach and the Drisha, when they say that the Badekin is the Chuppah, well, that obligates us to maintain that chuppah should be before kiddushin, and that is the way the Drisha explains the nusach of the brocha. Mekadosh Sham Yisrael Adei chuppah v'kiddushin, but it is a kiddush, and that is an additional reason why I think that this is a das yochid, that the bedek and the hinume would be defined as chuppah, not mamish a das yochid, because we brought various different sources. But it is definitely not the basic halachic opinion, and therefore is not brought in Mechaber, the Ramah, or the Noisei Kei. So this entire sugya is based, as we find in the Meril, on the Posuk, Vatikach, Hatzeif, V'tiskas. This week's Parsha starts off with Sara, Vayehi, Vayehiyu. Chayei Sara, Mea Shona v'Yesin Shona v'Sheva Shona Shnei Chayei Sara. Very famous Rashi. Lekach nichtav Shona b'chol klal v'chlal. Mea Shona, Esrim Shona v'Sheva Shonim. Shekol echad nidrash li'atzmo. Bas kuf kebas chof l'chet. Bas chof loichoto. Af bas kuf b'loichet. Bas chof kebas zayin li'yoif. And many Sifra Kodesh define that Yofi doesn't necessarily mean physical beauty in this context, but something that is beyond the physical realm. Nikius and beauty in the spiritual sense. What we learn from this posuk that in every stage in one's life, he needs to take advantage of what HaKadosh Baruch Hu bestowed upon him in that stage. Hasidim say in the name of Reb Sholem Belza, Sar Sholem Belz, he said a word on the Pusik, Ini enochi sholech lachem es Eliyahu Novi lefnei bo yerim Hashem hagodel v'anoyle v'heishav v'leiv avos el bonim v'leiv bonim el avoisam Jinge Herze für alte Menschen and alte Herze für jinge Menschen. Each period in our lives has its attributes, its powers. Young people have loads of energy, but sometimes they lack in wisdom and in insight. The elderly understand far more than the young. But by the time you understand life, there's not much you could do about it. You don't have the koyach to make a difference. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Lefnei bo yoim Hashem hagodel v'anoyle, will give young hearts to the elderly people. And the wisdom of the old will be bestowed upon the young. Sara Amenu knew how to take advantage of every period in her life. Bas kuf ke bas chof ke bas zayin. Knowing what is required in every stage of our lives, and the continuity and consistency, being consistent, dedicating every day to the service of the Kodesh Baruch Hu. Yodeya Hashem Yemei Tamimim, the Medrash says, kishem shehem tamimim, yomehem tamimim. The Zohar says, Avram Zoken Bobi Yomim. The Zohar says, Liosid Lavoi, when each and every one of us will appear before Melech HaMishpat, there will be like a video. Every day of your life will be displayed on the screen. And you will see with your eyes what you did each and every day. And you will have to give Din V'cheshem. Avram Zoken Bobi Yomim. All his days were filled and fulfilled with Torah, with Avodah, with Gemilas Chasod. What is unique about great people is it's not on and off. The consistency and the continuity of Avodas Hashem. The great Rosh Hashiva of Mir Reb Chaim Shmulevitz once dealt with a story told in Ksubas of Samach Beis about Rebbe Kiva and his wonderful tzedekis, Rochel Bas Kalbas Avila. Rebbe Kiva takes a break. His wife let him go 12 years in yeshiva. Well, 12 years, Bebei Rav. After 12 years of Arbotzes Torah, he comes home with 12,000 Talmidim. He's standing behind the door and he overhears a conversation between Rochel and a neighbor. And that neighbor asks Rochel, Ad Moshe Almones Chayes, what a husband you have. Doesn't even care for you. 12 years you haven't seen him. He hasn't seen you. Well, does he email? Does he SMS? How does Rochel respond? Eli de dit Zayit. If he would listen to me, he would go for another 12 years. Rebbe Kiva hears that, standing in the outside of the door. He goes right back to yeshiva, and Rochel didn't even see him for another 12 years. So Reb Chaim, in his unique style, asked, is that proper? Kimaran Steve,
Say hello.
Say hello, drink a cup of coffee, say thank you. That is even more important than saying hello. Tell your wife, well, I was on the other side of the door. I heard those beautiful words. I have no words to thank you. Spend some time with your wife and the children. You know her. I mean, by now you should know her. She'll let you go. So why? So Reb Chaim said, in the arithmetic of Torah, in the mathematics of Torah, 12 and 12 does not equal 24. That is a different mathematical system. In the mathematics of Torah, 12 and 12 is only 12 and 12. It does not equal 24. So if Rebbe Kiva would spend some time with his beautiful family and hug them and kiss them and say hello and say goodbye and and ask what happened recently. Last 12 years I haven't heard nothing. She would let him go back, but then he would have 12 years of Torah and another 12 years of Torah. That would not equal 24. So that is a gedank, Reb Chaim. And that is Kuf Chav Zayin Shonim, uninterrupted. One chain, one string of Torah, Avodah, and Gemilas Chesed. So the Medrash tells the story. Rabbi Kiva hoye Yoshe v'Doresh, v'bikesh hu am lehisnam mem. It's not a very pleasant feeling. I am happy to say that this is an experience I have very seldom had. But Rabbi Kiva, the great Tana, hoye Yoshe v'Doresh, v'bikesh hu am lehisnam mem, and people were drowsing off. And he wanted to say something to arouse them. So he says, Ma ra'aso Esther shetimlach al kuf chov zayin medinas. How is it that Esther Amalka, together with Achashverosh, had 127 peoples, nations, countries under their banner, under their crown? Tovei bas bitoy shel Sara shechayes al kuf chov zayin shonim, vetimlach al kuf chov zayin medinas. Sara lived 127 years. So her offspring, Esther Amalka, should have 127 Medinas.
Everybody woke up.
What's the shaykhs? Obviously, everybody woke up. Everybody woke up. Strange statement. What does one have to do with the other? So some say it has nothing to do one with the other. The only thing they do have one with the other is the coincidence of 127. It's the same number. 127 years, 127 Medinas. That is not the way we learn Chazal. And if Rabbi Kiva said, Kuf Chov Zayin Shonim, Baz Bito Kuf Chov Zayin Medinas, wasn't a joke. Well, it's interesting, maybe amusing, but it's not a joke, because Rabbi Kiva was not a joke. And he didn't say jokes. And in Pnimius, there must be something, some connection, some significance. And I think Rabbi Kiva, in a very simple sense, said, when a king has 127 countries under his memlocha, he has his hands full. Taking care of one country is more than what most people could muster. Our little country. Besides the Kodesh Baruch Hu, nobody is really in charge. So Esther had Kuf Chov Zayin Medinas. We could imagine she didn't have much spare time. Malchusa de Aram Me'en Malchusa de Rekia. Sara lived 127 years, and Chazal testified. Bas Kuf ke Bas Chof, Bas Chof ke Bas Zayin. Her entire life was one continuity, without interruption, of Avodas Elokim, utilizing and taking advantage of every period, of every stage, of the strength each and every one of us has in each different period, in each different stage in his life. David HaMelech, in Perek Chov Zayin in Tehillim, says, Acha shualti mi'es Hashem, oisa avate shifti beveis Hashem, kol yemei chayei, machziz benoyam Hashem ulevaker beheichol. Acha shualti, in the past, oisa avatesh, in the future. By our very nature, people have different dreams, different plans, different aspirations in each and every stage of their lives. A little boy, what does he dream about? Having a nice bicycle, and if he grows up in a real Ben Torah family, so he dreams about having his own Mishnayos, his own little Shas. And then you grow older, you have different aspirations, different dreams, different things to think about, and different hopes in your life. And when you're a young man, you think, I want to be the Gadol Hador. At some stage, it dawns upon you that it's not a very realistic dream, it's probably not going to happen, and at some stage, you just dream of getting up tomorrow morning without your back hurting, without stomach ache, without headache, and just thanking Kodesh Baruch Hu for every passing day. And especially if you have dramatic changes in your life. David HaMelech had super dramatic changes in his life. He was a shepherd. He was a shepherd. So what does a shepherd dream about? To find some shade in the desert, some water to drink, some peace of mind and tranquility. He was a shepherd. The Novi, Shmuel HaNovi, appointed him as Melech Yisrael, Melech Yehuda v'Yerushalayim. What are the dreams, the hopes, the aspirations of a king? Conquest, peace in his country. David HaMelech says, Naru isi v'gam zukant. But my hopes, my dreams, my aspirations have never changed. I was a shepherd, and now I'm king of Yehuda v'Yerushalayim. Acha shualti mi'es Hashem, in the past, oisa avakesh, till the end of my days. Shifti beveis Hashem kol yemei chayei, nachzois benoyam Hashem ulevaker beheichol. Bas Kuf Kibas Chof, Bas Chof Kibas Zayin. Serving a Kodesh Baruch with all our powers, with all our strengths, with whatever He has bestowed upon us. That is the Avos, and we too aspire to follow in their footsteps. Chayav Odom Loimar, Mosai Agio Masai, Masai Avosai Yihirosan. We should always have the zchus to learn from our Avos, to follow in their footsteps, and the Kodesh Baruch Hu should remember Chaz the Avos, and we should be zeichen to be as Goyal Tzedek and Binyan Beis HaMikdash, B'mheiro V'yomeinu Amen.